everyone. Welcome, Davida. Thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. So everyone, today I have Davida Ginter. Is that how I say your name right?
Okay. Yes.
And she is coming all the way from Israel. And Davida, you are a burnout expert. I think everyone needs that in their lives. So you are the CEO of Enkindle Global, the author of Burning Out Won't Get You There. You are a speaker and you are a social change catalyzer. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's me. And it's all, actually what I love about this is the combination, because I feel that each part fits the other. And it almost happened coincidentally that I became a burnout expert, if I would believe in coincidence, which I don't. And I was working in the field of sustainability and leadership, again, intersection combined together, working with leaders and change makers to help them mobilize social change. How do they take their vision and make it into reality? And I'm still doing that. I still love what I'm doing. This is why I call it a social change catalyzer. But while doing that, I noticed so many of my colleagues and the people I've been working with, I noticed so many of them get stressed out and then burnt out. And I found it even ironic that, we sustainability people forget to sustain ourselves. Now, I was very, very curious to know why is this sector of, change makers and social leaders, why are we so likely to get burnt out? And this is how I went to explore that. This is how the book was born, and then the organization and all this mission around.
It's amazing. So I was lucky enough to read your book, and we're going to talk about your book, Burning Out Won't Get You There, in a minute. But first, I'd love to know about your organization. So this organization called Enkindle Global, what kind of services do you provide and for whom?
Yeah, so Enkindle Global is basically dedicated to support leaders, as in individuals and organizations, in burnout prevention. And the main bit here is processes that we facilitate with organizations, with leaders. It's never for them, it's always with them, because we don't do consulting. I never come with pre-made solutions. My team and I step into an organization to work together with them to co-create a process that will help them implement well-being into the organization and therefore prevent burnout. So it could be that we help them to identify the stressors. And it's always fascinating to see what they have perceived as stressors and what they reveal during the process. It's always different. So fascinating to see that. And we help them to set a vision around well-being and then bridge that gap between what's going on now, the current reality, and that vision, and then implement that. Because the way to prevent burnout is to go consistently and actually change your routine. It's never like random solution. It never works, right? Like to go on a retreat, to have those random things. It's never deep enough to address the core problems that actually cause burnout.
Well, it's a Band-Aid, right? I mean, you can escape and you go for this beautiful retreat or you go for a vacation, but as soon as you come back, you have to be submerged to the same stress because your routine hasn't changed. So taking a short break really doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah, you are spot on, because the thing is that when we go away and we come back, we may come back recharged. So I have nothing against, retreats and workshops and everything. These are wonderful. But when you go back to the very same system that had contributed to the burnout or the situation or the stressors, whatever it is, nothing had changed. This is why we love working with leaders who could ripple the effect, who could really make the change. So where is the leverage point here? And obviously it's in the leadership level. that cares enough to make change.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you is, do you have a burnout ambassador that you designate in the organization? Because
Mhm.
for my perspective, I would logically think it would be an HR, head of HR person who would be trying to ensure the well-being of the team. But maybe the CEO is the actual culprit who is stressing everybody by these processes like overwork, because you're right that it usually comes from the leader. But here's my question: while the HR person definitely wants everyone to not be stressed and the team doesn't want to be stressed, what do you do when you have an ambitious workaholic CEO with a
Mhm.
huge ego who just wants to change the world and has maybe even a little bit unrealistic expectation? When they're the problem, how do you address that? It's a little complicated and delicate,
It
right?
is. It is. And I love this question because this is exactly the challenge, but also the beauty in that of facilitating a process which is participatory. This is exactly why we don't come with pre-made solutions or formula. And what we would do is to help everyone in that process to reveal the blind spots, to observe, to listen. There are big parts of this process which are about listening. So, listening to others, listening to ourselves. What is the story that we have been telling ourselves all the time? We provoke them with questions like, how do you define success? Let me tell you a story. I was sitting with a CEO in one of the workshops. And during the break time, she came to me. So it was a group of CEOs. It wasn't an organization. It was several executives and CEOs coming together. So one of them sat with me during break, and she started talking with me about the content and the workshop and burnout. And I can't remember how we got it, but I asked her, okay, so how do you define the success of your organization? And she told me about all the wonderful things that they are doing and all their projects and their missions and their goals and everything. It was so wonderful to listen, and sustainable impact. And I told her, I'm so impressed. I just want to ask you, you haven't mentioned even in one word your well being, either yours or your employee well being. And she went, she went very quiet, and I thought maybe I offended her or something, and asked, is everything okay? She said, oh yeah, I was never asked that before. I never gave it one thought to incorporate well-being in my definition of success.
Oh,
And yeah, she messaged me a month after that, commenting how it changed her perspective on the organization. So yeah, part of the process is exactly what you said, to take this person with us by opening up the perspective. How do we see the culture? How do we see the organization? How do we see people in the organization, in the system? It's a system, it's a living system, right?
absolutely. And I think the biggest challenge that I would wonder, because I've been one of those CEOs, it's very hard when you're trying to push change and you have ambition and you have a vision. It's very hard to combine that with balance. And we're constantly told now that we have to have work-life balance and we need to have, well-being. But the reality is long work hours, uh, a lot of dynamic change, always constantly worrying about things that can go wrong on your project, unexpected things happen. So running a company, especially trying to change the world kind of company, is very, very stressful, right? So the question I want to ask you is, with globalization, with people forced to deal with employees and distributors and partners all over the world, it feels like today we're always on. We can
Mhm.
never really fully unplug. How do you deal with a CEO who says, I'm completely burned out, but 24/7 I'm attached to my phone. I can't live without my phone. Do you have any like solutions?
Yeah, I would challenge the term work-life balance. And things actually evolve since I've written this in the book. So I will challenge that and I ask, what is a work-life balance? If we draw a firm line between work and personal life, and it's even now more visible during COVID. If we draw that firm line, then we try to separate something which almost is inseparable, which is ourselves as people and our work. But if we challenge the definition and we find a better balance that works for us. So for example, if I know that I need to take calls during the evening because it's a global business, right? I might want to find my balance in another way, which is to allocate time during the day, during even the work routine, to allocate time for my well-being. So it could be a true story from today that I took one phone call while walking and then another one sitting in the sun. And we have sometimes this old-fashioned thinking about how work should be done, while we are at the same time we're very progressive with different aspects of work, but we're still caught in an old manner type of working. But what if we can do it differently? So before COVID, it could be walking meetings, walk along with with the other person in the meeting instead of sitting across the table. And walking by itself, it's so nourishing, so contributing to how you feel, how you interact, even your creativity. And now, okay, we need to sit in front of the screen, but that doesn't mean that we can't do things differently.
I love that. I mean, because right now you and I are talking during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's still happening, and we don't know how long this will go on still in next year. But one thing's for sure is that many people have now had that challenge where they can't ignore anymore the separation between home and work because Mom. Oh, thank you, honey. Because just like me, I have a toddler here.
When you allocate the time, when you prioritize that, this is important enough for me to prioritize. This is important enough for all of us as a team, as an organization, that it's not work is more important than us as human, than our basic needs. This is all coming together. This is why I call it a different type of balance. So when you do that, you actually signal your surroundings, yeah, I want that this bit of well-being gets prioritized as well.
I love that, because what you're saying is top-down wellness. So the leader has to be setting the example. And this is so against everything in traditional management. You cannot believe. I mean, traditionally, we've always been taught that the leader has to be the first one in the office. And now things have really changed, right? What do you do when you have a lot of resistance? Because some people, they say they want to change, but it's habits are so hard to break. And it's almost like a machine, right?
Those are rooted habits. And in order to change a habit, you need to replace it with another one. So first, it's about just being aware that there's another way around burnout. So there's another way of doing that. There's another way of work, of living, of interacting. And this is important because people think it's a common mistake actually around burnout. People think that we burned out because we have this workload. No, that's not the main reason. That's not the common reason of burnout. People get burned out when they don't feel appreciated, valued, when there are trust issues and lack of healthy communication. So when we can change the way that we work, live, and interact with people, that's by itself a huge progress towards a life of well-being and avoiding burnout. But when you ask about How do you face resistance? I'd start with, well, like we said, awareness that there is another way, but I will also say, I will not fight with those people. So sometimes, people are going very pushy towards behavior change. But I don't know if you have ever tried to change another person, it usually doesn't work, right? We can only change ourselves. What we can do is open a window for them to look through. We can offer another lens. And I believe in positive communication, not as in, oh, everything is so, pinky and hippie. That's not that. It's about when we push, people will push back. But when we offer something, when we open the road for them, they might walk with us. But it's their decision, it's their responsibility, it's their commitment. The more you can engage the other person so he will feel or she will feel they own this process, the more likely they are to actually change their habits, their behavior.
Well, one of the things that I've seen in behavior change in other areas, for example, breaking a bad habit such as smoking, or maybe it's weight loss goal, and people have to change those habits that they have, is accountability and
Yes.
also incentivizing the change. So when you talked earlier about going into organizations and listening and having a lot of sessions where people listen to each other, I assume that it's not a change habit in a bubble. It's not, okay, now you go off and change and you go off and change. It's a dynamic process that includes the whole team, maybe changing a few things. So there is built-in accountability by default. Because if you've decided as a group, well, this is what's stressing us, this process, how we do, I don't know, the Friday delivery is really stressful, let's rethink it and let's change the steps. Those steps include different people, I assume. So then there's automatic accountability because you're making an agreement outside of just yourself. You're saying, okay, I
Yes.
agree to do this. Sometimes that's easier than changing yourself on your own, right? It's kind of like, well, I have to call Davida at 10 a.m. because we agreed that's the new process.
That's definitely helpful to have accountability. And I would say at a larger scale, it's helpful to connect. It's helpful to know that we are not alone in that. And, even open up the conversation about stress and burnout is sometimes a big help for people who need to be heard. Sometimes no one listened to them before, no one believed them that they are so stressed, or they didn't feel comfortable to openly talk about their struggles, right? Because it is perceived as weakness, which we know it's not, right? It's part of vulnerability, but this is how we see it, right? People feel the need to be the toughest in the room. So the first step is actually, like I said, yeah, open up the conversation, and then accountability and connecting to other people. But I think what I like about this process, the beauty that I see, is that it's not just a team commitment, it's also the diversity in that process. So each person takes it in the slightly different area. I've seen, so people came through the same process, they came through the other side going in different directions in a good way. So personally, one took it to treat their health issues, while another one, their takeaways were about team communication or how to face stress at work. So part of the beauty actually is that for each one there's a different takeaway, and that's fine. That's more than fine. That's beautiful, because we are also different people with different contexts, and that's part of it. So it's never about enforcing the change. It's about encouraging, it's about inspiring. And another part that could be really, really helpful here is the storytelling. So instead of come and teach them what to do, we share stories and we encourage them to share stories. And we all, from age, 0 till we die. We love stories. We connect to stories. Stories engage us. So when we listen to stories about first burnout and then how can people actually prevent it or overcome it, we are more likely to change something because we have now emotionally connected to the topic.
One thing I really want to ask you is, when should a person reach out to your organization? Because in your book, you talk about, burnout is something that when you, first of all, might not recognize. Like you gave an example from one of my friends, Zeta Yarwood, who is in Dubai, how she went to the doctor and she found out she had walking pneumonia. She'd been going around, she was so burnt out, she didn't even realize that she was actually really sick. Um, so that's an extreme example. And so I really want to know, like, what are the signs? Do you have a checklist? Like, if you go online and you're like self-diagnosing yourself, you're like, am I burnt out? Because we might not even
Yeah,
recognize in our busy lives when we
we
are
might
really
not.
burnt out.
Yeah, we might not even recognize. I have to share with you that since I've written the book and I've interviewed Zeta 3 or 4 years ago, I've been exposed to so many similar stories that you would be surprised how not extreme this story is. And it is, you know, quite alarming. So, first, I would say generally that our body oftentimes is smarter than our mind and brain, in a sense that we can ignore our mind when it tells us, oh, you can keep going, you can push forward, but our body will never lie to us. And now it's a question, do we know how to listen to our body? I had to find out that for myself, to be honest. It took me many, many years to learn to listen to my body, to the signs. What does it tell me? Maybe I need to pause now. Maybe I need to fully stop now. Maybe I need to change something, whatever it is. So our body is smart. It's only a question, do we know how to listen to the signs? But to your question, how do we recognize burnout? Yeah, there's actually a formal list of signs we can recognize. The first one is exhaustion. I'm talking about chronic tiredness, that we feel tired every day, sometimes even all day. And I've been um, talking with people who told me I couldn't understand it. I couldn't figure it out. I've slept 7, 8 hours a night and I still woke up tired, exhausted every day. And the answer is that it was emotional exhaustion translated into physical tiredness. So that's the first sign to actually notice about yourself. Do you feel tired, exhausted every day, all the time? It's a red flag there that you should check, absolutely. The second one is feelings of cynicism, and you're being negative towards your work, your mission, your co-workers, maybe the boss. And we all feel sometimes a little, resentful, we or annoyed or frustrated with the work, and that's fine, that's normal, everything is okay. But when we constantly feel very negative about what we do or how it's been done or the system or our coworkers, when we feel it every day and we keep being very, very, cynical about it, that's again a big sign that something is going on there and could point out that we are approaching burnout. And the third sign is, of course, and that's quite obvious, but it's interesting to notice, reduced productivity and effectivity. And actually, I will add to that reduced creativity. We can't innovate when we are in this survival mode, right? So at some point, we just notice it's not just lack of inspiration. It's not that the muses have, left us for a few days. There's something again going on there that we might be approaching this burnout, and we can just notice that we're no longer productive as we used to be. We're no longer creative. So we need to change something in that routine.
Okay, so if I start noticing those signs in someone, um, Are you working with individuals or only with corporations?
We're definitely working as well with individuals. We just change and customize those solutions all the time. So some people need mentoring, while others prefer to join a course that is designed for individuals coming together as a group, or we just watching pre-recorded videos. So yeah, we have solutions for individuals. At the same time, we always encourage organizations or systems to take more systemic solutions. So we do both, definitely. We just felt that after working with individuals for a while, we wanted to tap into the system. This is how we started working with organizations as well.
Well, it also depends. Like the example of Zeta, who's in your book, she is a executive coach, so she runs her own business, and so the stress was actually self-imposed. She's working,
Yes.
she's doing it herself. But if someone comes to you as an individual and says, "I'm so burnt out," and it turns out they're part of a chain reaction happening within their organization, then it really makes sense that they would need to either leave their organization if it's so bad, or they would need their organization to work with you and do consulting for the whole team, because otherwise,
Yeah.
what are they going to do? They can do all these wonderful things outside, then they go back to work and they're
Exactly.
trapped, right?
Yeah. But I do yeah, I absolutely, but I do agree to you that it's both. So it's the system's responsibility as well as the individual's responsibility. There is a lot we can do as people, as individuals, to reclaim our inner resilience, our emotional well-being. There's so much that we can do on our free time and during work to just, thrive there. We don't just need to sit there and, survive and say, hey, so I get along with it and, until I retire or something. We are beyond that point of working just to make a living and survive. I hope we are beyond that point. I hope we reach to a point that we understand how fulfillment and our health plays such an important role in the choices that we make, in how we work, how we live, how we lead, how we interact.
Well, I love in your book, you have your daily practices. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that would be more probably on an individual level.
Yeah, thank you. There was one specific that you liked, something that spoke to you more personally.
I think for me, I've always loved to do morning routines. So having
Mm,
a gratitude practice, doing some yoga and meditation, uh, having some creative journaling. When I read your book, I said, "Oh, this really this is wellness. This is really a powerful thing." And now I think, luckily, more and more CEOs or business owners are recognizing that they need that. It's become actually quite popular to meditate. Almost all CEOs I know have tried to start a morning practice, and
mm.
also stuff like journaling. So I was just curious if you have anything to tell us about how that came about, those practices.
Yeah, so first I will say that this is very, very personal, not personal to me, personal to anyone. So every advice that we are exposed to should be taken through filters. So I would never advise someone else to do what I do because, different practices serve different people in varied ways. What I've shared there in the section of daily practices, it's taken from the contemplative practices approach, and basically it's mapped through under different categories of connecting, centering, grounding, gratitude, and there are many suggestions there, and again it should be very, very personally what we choose that will help us. So for example, but the interesting part is that all of them are around observation, even self observation, I would say, but also observing around us. and reconnecting. So what are the ways? It could be, like you said, gratitude. It could be journaling in different ways. Some people like it very, very structured, the journaling. I myself just need put pen to paper, and I'm good to go. Like whenever, whatever. I just need to pour my thoughts onto the page. That's my way of releasing my energy and gain inner clarity. So for other people, it's a lot around movement, either sports or even dancing or anything that the movement, the external movement, the physical movement enhances the internal movement of thought. So it drives the inner creation in a way. But for other people, again, choice, for other people, they might want to practice more stillness. We are living and working in a hectic environment. So maybe for us, right, some stillness, some quiet time, finding my spot where I can, reflect with some peace and quiet. That could be a daily practice that I want to incorporate. And so there are many more. It's a question of where do I find my balance? And according to that, I will choose the practice, what could help me to regain my balance.
I love that
As
because that's something that I see several people fail in when they're given imposed practices and other
mm,
people dictate like these are the things you have to do, and like you said, it should be personal, but it's all about reconnecting. All those things that you just described are just different tools for the same purpose of reconnecting with yourself.
yes, because the thing about burnout, when people actually hit the wall about burnout, is that they often lose the sense of identity. Who are we even? I've heard this phrase so many times. And if you want to reverse that, you want to reconnect to yourself, your real self, your inner voice that might be buried under years, layers and layers of external influences telling you what you should be doing in that setting. When you do have your own voice and you know what to do, you just need, to dig in and find it again.
No, that's beautiful. I've noticed in my personal life how important that early morning time is for me, where no one else is awake and I can just be alone and it's completely quiet and I can make my coffee and I have my little habits that I've done, but I think that without that it would be um my life wouldn't be as meaningful. I do think that gives me a great meaning. And then at work, so we live in a world where we're not just disconnected from ourselves, but we're also disconnected from others. Everyone is texting each other. Everyone's in a hurry. Things are sometimes impersonal in today's world. How do you advise people or suggest that people find ways of connecting with others in more meaningful ways?
If you would ask me that question a few months ago before COVID hit, I would say find any chance that you can to disconnect in person. Of course, now it's this advice is on hold. But I would still say there's still a way to connect in a more genuine way, the way I see it. And that is through listening and through asking questions instead of making assumptions. Because part of the problem is that we make assumptions, we jump into conclusions, sometimes we jump into judgments. And we think we know who the person is according to their title, their status, their post on social media. But can we really get to know a person through a short title and some paragraphs or even a video that this person never, right? So I would sit here with you. This is the first time we are connecting face to face, right? And I would ask you questions that I'm curious to know, but also that will open the space for you to show me who you are and for us to really connect. I will not jump into assumption. I will ask the questions and I will listen. And even here, there's a trick with listening, which is to go to deep listening, because I can listen to you and that will just, reconfirm what I've thought about you. While I can listen to you with a totally open mind and really learn new things about you instead of, downloading the patterns in my head. Really open up the space here.
This is how I came to LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I really discovered this community of people who wanted to connect or reconnect with others on a deeper level than Facebook, Instagram. Those places are more superficial and more entertainment oriented and just superficial. Where LinkedIn, I've been doing a lot of Zoom calls with people, and these conversations are so deep. We're actually having real conversations. And as to your point, when you just see someone's title, you have no idea. And I've had conversations that were supposed to be 1 hour that turned into 3 hours, that turned into weekly calls, because we had so much in common. And so we
That's
really need to
beautiful.
try to look below the surface of people, right? But to the point of burnout, back to that topic, connecting with people, what does that do to help prevent burnout? How can we see that need in the human for our health?
First of all, and it's really important, we feel that we are not alone. We are social creatures. We need connection, we seek connection. So when we are connecting, we feel that we are not alone and we are meeting this basic need. And that's by itself contributes to our well-being. And that's, one way to go in a healthier path and prevent burnout. The second thing is that burnout is basically chronic stress. Continuous stress has not been successfully managed. That's actually the definition. So the thing is that we can hold some stress and then some more, and then hits another one, and maybe professional, personal coming all together. That's a lot to carry. But when we are connecting with other people, they are helping us to relieve that stress. It could be through advice, it could be to support, it could be through empathy. Maybe we don't need advice, maybe we just need someone to listen to us. We have said this before. So by having this connection, by having someone in our lives that we can trust, they help relieve the stress. They help us gain clarity. They help us regain proportions. Because the problem is never the stress itself. We can manage that. The problem is how we perceive the stress. That extra layer of worry, that pressure that we put on ourselves, while another person, again, that we love and trust and could help us, they help us with their perspective to see things differently. It doesn't matter if they provide a solution or the solution will come from us. They just help us to sometimes just reverse the view, the perspective that we have held on to until now. And third, it's just, I know it sounds weird, but it's a big part. It's just more enjoyable to connect, to have other people in our lives, right? And when we feel that enjoyment, when we feel, all right, so we're more alive, not because we are dependent on other people, but because, again, we are social creatures, so there is some enrichment going in there, in the connection. That's a nicer way to go through life and work and everything that we do. So we are not burning out because we are enjoying ourselves in that process, despite the challenges, despite the stresses, despite everything. We are connecting and we feel belong to this surrounding.
What you just said about belonging, I think that it's even more maybe business owners who are solopreneurs who are at risk for burnout because we are often alone all day long. You know, even if you're married, your spouse is working, they're probably not there. I mean, outside of COVID times. And so all day long, you're just with yourself, you have no colleagues. And this can be very lonely. So I felt like as an entrepreneur, even more happy to go on LinkedIn and meet other people. And also, I've joined a few Facebook groups for other entrepreneurs connection. And then also going to conferences. I get so excited to go to conferences
Mhm.
because I get to be with people and,
I
you know,
know.
working at home all day. So I think now people who usually work in an office, they will appreciate even more the connectivity
Yes.
after being confined alone working on your screen for months and months.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much for
You
this.
say bye, Debbie.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye, sweetie. Bye bye.